It isn't that she fell into anything she was doing to exercise. It's more about
Good morning, everyone. I think it's nearly 11. Ed's giving the signal to begin. He's all set. So welcome to the fourth presentation that Harry will give on fathers and sons, and this is the Peale family. Will everyone kindly silence or turn off your cell phones so that we don't have interruptions? And wait, if you have a question, wait for the mic and we'll come to you. Thank you. So Harry?
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for coming. Is this sound good? Can you hear me all right in the back?
Yes.
Let's turn the lights off here. Okay, so this is actually the third class that deals with Charles Willson Peale. You heard this summer Darrell held forth on Peale, which I unfortunately was not here for. Libby, for the last 4 classes, has worked him into various aspects of Philadelphia history during the Revolution. And I will try to fill in some of the gaps to give you an idea of the breadth of this man's interests and abilities. His father, Charles Peale, not Charles Willson Peale, Charles Peale was exiled to the colonies in the 1740s. He actually had gone to Cambridge for a while, and then he was banished for stealing funds by forging signatures on post office materials. There was some question about his guilt, but he was sentenced to death, and then his family managed to pull some strings, and he was transported to this country. However, and he rose up or continues to lead his life in Virginia, marries, has children, dies, I think it was at 41, and his oldest son, Charles Willson, at the age of 9, feels responsible. It takes responsibility for kind of bringing all of his sisters and 2 brothers into the mainstream of life at that point. So he has puts a lot of responsibility, a lot of pressure on himself to sort of try to educate his family starting at the age of 9. That's quite a challenge. His son, Charles W., starts out as a saddle maker and then quickly discovers this is not his calling and begins to study art. Later he goes to London, studies with Benjamin West, so he becomes a very well-educated artist as well as an inventor in all of these other aspects of his life. Here's a picture of him on the right as a Revolutionary War soldier. After the fighting in the war, commits himself to celebrating the United States by depicting natural history and notable countrymen. And here's his picture of Lafayette when Lafayette, as Libby was saying, was in his early 20s probably when the revolution was finally over. But he would be younger than that in 1778. He enlists in the Continental Army when the Revolutionary War breaks out. He fights in the Battle of Trenton and Princeton with his brother James. He has another brother, St. George, who we don't know much about, so I don't really know whether he was involved in this or not. He dies without being particularly notable. During the course of his artistic career, Peale will paint close to 1,000 portraits of American luminaries, in addition to lots of just private pictures that were commissioned by friends, or as he got to be known as a portrait painter. He's mainly a portrait painter. He does landscapes, he does some other things, but not to the extent that he does portraits, and he makes a very good living doing this and other things that interested him during his career. Now this is an interesting family picture. Private collection, painted between 1771 and 73. Prominent art. His 2 sons, Raphael, born 74, and Rembrandt, 78, are in this picture. The others are not. And let's see if I can point out where they are here. Here's Peale right here. And he's talking to his brother James, who's showing his brother, he's showing his brains how he's doing this painting. He's doing a painting of sketch, at least of his mother, who's sitting right here, his wife right here, and his two oldest children. The oldest one is, this one's older. Which one is older? This one, is that one the oldest? I want to say. This is Raphael. Is that right, Charles? All right. This is the older child. One's 4 and one's 2, sort of, or one's right here. And this is the nurse is in the background, right back in here. His wife is right here. One of his sisters, I think, right here. Here's his brother, this mysterious figure, St. George, his second brother. This is a brother we all know and becomes a successful painter. This man dies in his early 40s, and we don't really know much about him. I haven't been able to find much about him, but that's he puts him in the picture. There's a dog. The family dog is down in here, and there's a bust back in here. So this gives you an idea fairly early in his career, at least of his family as it grows. He's going to have many children, actually. He has 3 different wives, but I'll get back to that. Okay, so he's a Renaissance man who has expertise not only in painting, but in other many diverse fields: carpentry, dentistry, optometry, shoemaking, taxidermy. In 1802, John Isaac Hawkins patented the second official physionotrace, a mechanical drawing device, and partnered with Peale to market it to prospective buyers. Libby, you want to hold yours up so people can see what it looks like? It's still marketed. I don't know where you got that, but there's a picture right there of it. Somebody else brought one too, I think.
This is a silhouette.
Somebody else bring one?
Actually done by, if you're gonna get into this, Peale's slave Moses
Yeah.
Williams.
It's done by Peale's slave. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But physionotrace, designed to trace a person's physiognomy to make a automated portrait, which they can aquatet if they wanted to. It was invented in France. It was popular for many decades. The sitter climbs into a chair right here. You can see there. And again, I can't tell you how the whole Peale sketches them, or Peale's slave actually is the one that does this ultimately. I wish I knew more about how the process actually worked, but it was very popular in the late 18th and early 19th century. Okay, now some of the portraits. Using the portraits he initially paints of Washington, Peale produces about 60 portraits of Washington. He copies what he's done, but these are all individual portraits that he painted. The one on the right is at Princeton University. His portraits are known for their straightforward and accurate likeness of his subjects. That's the main thing I would say about them. Washington at Princeton in 2003 sold for $21 million. He produces many replicas, as I said, he also does a number of landscapes, but his main feature is as a portraitist, and in this way he influenced his sons very strongly too. So here's somebody Libby talked about yesterday, Benjamin Franklin, a little more intimate position in a sketch on the left. When they overlap in London for a while, and he completes scores of portraits of historic figures. And he and Franklin get to be good friends. He was studying art at that time with Benjamin West in the late 1760s, when Franklin was an agent for the colonies. The two men find that they have a shared passion for the natural sciences. In fact, Franklin later donates the carcass of an Angora cat to Peale's museum, if that sounds somewhat unusual. Peale's collection of natural specimens, he hopes to be able to have this, but his inexperience with taxidermy means that the carcass was lost. But that's a sort of the extreme to which Franklin was willing to try to encourage Peale to keep his museum, keep it going. And these two subjects, I think you recognize, Thomas Jefferson on the left and Alexander Hamilton. And these two men, as you probably know from American history, are constantly at odds with each other when they were in Washington's cabinet. Peale painted over, as I said, over 1,000 actually, many of which are private. In 1791, Peale added this portrait of the Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, to his museum's collection of American heroes. Jefferson appears somewhat younger than his 50 years old, as we can see on the left here, perhaps evoking the young man the artist remembered as a Virginia delegate to the Continental Congress. Jefferson was well known, obviously, by 1791, having served as governor of Virginia, ambassador to France, and then, of course, he becomes Secretary of State under Washington, and later, of course, as president himself. Hamilton is at the height of his career when Charles Willson paints his portrait for the Philadelphia Museum. The portrait appears to be rather hasty, as I've read comments about this, a hastily done reworking of a sketch done sometime after the initial sitting. Only the face is painted in detail, but he wanted to have something of Hamilton, and as you know, Hamilton was killed in a duel in 1804, I think it was, so he's not around for many future portraits. Another prominent figure is John Hancock, with his signature up there on the left, an American founding father, merchant, statesman, prominent patriot of the Revolution, and as you can see, his signature on the copy of the Declaration of Independence is seen right here. It's not a myth, he really signed it that way. He was the longest serving president of the Continental Congress, having served as second president of the Continental Congress and the seventh president of the Continental Congress. He was the first and third governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Before the American Revolution, Hancock was one of the wealthiest men in the 13 colonies, having inherited a profitable mercantile business from his uncle. He began his political career in Boston as a protege of Samuel Adams. So he's a very, again, distinguished, notable person whose portrait Peale paints. Here's a self-portrait of a daughter having fun with it in the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. Charles paints a portrait of his first wife, Rachel Brewer Peale, and their daughter, Angelica Kaufman, mimics her father's gesture, symbolically holding the end of his paintbrush right here. She's sort of having fun with daddy right here. He married 3 times. His first wife dies, and he fathers 18 children, named many of his children, as you know, for famous artists and scientists. He and his first wife, Rachel, who died in 1790, had 11 children. 7 of them survived childhood, which is pretty good in those days. 1 died at the age of 18. 3 of Peale's daughters were named for important painters: Angelica Kaufman, Sofonista, another one, and then Rosabella Cartier, who I'll talk about a little bit later. So he has 18 children in all with 3 wives. His second wife has 7 more or something. His third wife is devoted to just bringing up the family, the tribe who are here, or thinking of names for the new ones, I guess. Okay, so he marries Rachel Brewer, who bores 10, as I said, or 9. Most of them named for his favorite male artists. His second wife, he had 6 additional children. In 1805, he marries Hannah Moore, Quaker from Philadelphia, who became his third wife and helps, as I said, to raise his younger children from his previous 2 marriages. So I don't have a portrait of the third wife, but here are the first 2. Rachel literally weeping over the death of one of their children right here from smallpox, which they the smallpox vaccine was around at that point, but not widely circulated. So there are certainly people who could still die of it. Okay, now this is one of his most celebrating paintings. This is it's called The Staircase Group, a double portrait of his sons, Raphael and Titian, painted in the trompe-l'oeil fashion. It's sort of an optical illusion of the three-dimensional objects on a two-dimensional surface, and it fools a lot of people because nobody had ever seen something like this before. Titian Ramsay Peale gestures at the top of the stairs as his older brother Raphael, who was 21. This boy is now supposed to be 21. He looks like about 14, and this guy is about, maybe he's 14. As his palette in hand slides upward just above the real step attached to the base of the canvas. So there is a real step here, but it certainly fooled George Washington when he saw it. He mistook this highly illusionistic picture for the young men themselves. Now this picture right here of Raphael, that's the oldest son, and yet he's made out to be just kind of a relatively young teenager. And there was a lot of talk about fathers and sons in conflicts, which I'll talk more about next week with Renoir, this real conflict. But this was difficult. His father, Charles Willson, wanted Raphael to be a painter, and he was. He painted still lives mostly. He wanted him to paint portraits. And there's a real gap that develops between them. This young man drinks too much. He leads a very unstable life, and he dies. He actually predeceases his father. And it's interesting, people speculate about, did he, at that point, even when he's 21, he's trying to make him appear younger, more adolescent. Is there some message in here that he's trying to convey? I've got a brief YouTube to show you of this.
In this double portrait, two of his sons, painted by Charles Willson Peale, Raphael, the older boy, ascends the stairs with his palette, brushes, and maulstick, while Titian Ramsay peeks around the corner of the door frame. Their expressions capture their ages. Titian Ramsay was only 14, and Raphael was beginning his career as an artist. Peale first exhibited the portrait in 1795, as we see it today, in a frame which unites the gallery space with the space of the canvas, fooling the viewer into believing the illusion. The lifelike scale of the figures, the high degree of detail and finish, and the careful use of light and shadow all enhance the immediacy of the subject. Years later, Charles Wilson's son, Rembrandt, would recall that even George Washington tipped his hat to these two young men on the stairs, mistakenly thinking they were real.
Okay. Okay, now let's go on to another area of his interest. This is the exhumation of a mastodon done in the early 19th century in the Maryland Center today for History and Culture. He embodies the spirit of the Renaissance as an artist, scientist, and inventor. And he's remembered mostly for his portraits, but he does paint landscapes. I just wanted to show you this one, which is quite interesting. He's painting a picture of workers lowering the water level in this pit where the mastodon's body is supposed to be down in here. He's also, this is Peale up in here, and I'll show you a closer up in a minute. And that's got a drawing or picture of what a mastodon bone would look like over here. And in the background, again, I'll show you a closer one, is a picture of his whole family right there. And here are the workers sort of showing the different stages that you have to go through to get the water, get the water out of the pit, to clear it out, then to begin working on finding the mastodon bones. The crowd of spectators includes 15 members of his family, making it clear that he sees this event and his entire museum creation as a family affair. The background for this is in the Hudson River Valley, landscape near the Catskills, complete with the threat of a coming storm in the background in here. There's apparently about to be a thunderstorm. The painting symbolizes the American ambition to claim scientific and historical significance through the discovery of this prehistoric creature. Back in a time when there was very little interest and awareness of this, and Peale himself educates the community at this point. Here's a detail of this. If you could look through, see the landscape creation of this myth for the United States. He paints the retrieval of the most complete mastodon skeleton found at that time from a waterlogged marl pit, a soil material that is a mixture of clay and carbonate of lime. It's near Newburgh, New York. And again, you can see the buckets being raised from the water, and then Peale more prominently displayed himself and members of his family in the background, and the bone of a mastodon over in here. So there are other landscapes that I could show you, but I think that's perhaps the most interesting one with people in it, as well as showing one of his other interests. So here he is, self-portrait with a mastodon bone on the left, and the drawing of Peale's 11-foot tall mastodon skeleton in 1816. The downturned tusks were intended to emphasize the animal's ferocity as a carnivore. And as far as I know, that's still in the museum. Am I right about it? I think it's in his museum downtown. In an era there's little awareness of the extinction of the pre-human past. The animal's identity has been a subject of vigorous debate for nearly a century. In both Europe and America, naturalists on both sides of the Atlantic had puzzled over these bones ever since they were first discovered on the banks of the Hudson. American mastodons lived in prehistoric North America and were widespread across the continent. Again, I didn't realize this, from Alaska to Mexico. There were mastodons all over the place, and I'm sure many others have been found, but here's the first one was found by Peale, and it's in his museum downtown. Here's after organizing the first expedition to get the mastodon, Peale establishes what had become the Philadelphia Museum, now Philosophical Hall, adjacent to Independence Hall. It was a museum dedicated to the biology of the planet, specifically the biology of the American continent. It was originally also organized as an art museum. In 1786, he adds a natural history collection that includes the nearly complete mastodon skeleton. It was the first in American history to display mastodon bones, which were originally called mammoth bones. People worked on mounting the bones in three-dimensional space, increasing the realism and influencing how all the bones were to be displayed from then on. Peale's museum was much more than a portrait gallery, which it starts as. As a follower of the Enlightenment, he believed there was much to be learned from the natural world, and he certainly starts it with his expedition to exhume the bones in the Hudson. He's a jack of all trades. I just show you some other things that he's done with technological interest in everything. Throughout his life, he tinkered with lots of things. His family shares his enthusiasm. For example, they patented efficient stoves on the left, improved bicycle prototypes. I'm not sure as I'd want to ride that, but it's still that's a bicycle, he recognized it, and even tests false teeth. This stuff is strewn all around his studio when you're visited by a friend who told Peale that he would rather travel some distance to pay a fee to see the artifacts rather than these. And that's what gets him started on thinking that a museum would be appropriate. Peale apparently rethinks his gallery plans and decides also to open a natural history wing. One should note that he knew nothing about natural history, taxidermy, or other museums. So he starts really from the ground up, and that's why when Franklin gives him the carcass of the cat, why he doesn't know how to handle it at that point. So here he is in his museum, a self-portrait displayed at the Academy of Fine Arts, Philadelphia. The stamp's been made out of him. Here he is lifting a famous picture on the left, lifting the tapestry up. Depicts the 81-year-old artist posed in his museum, which then occupies the second floor of Independence Hall. This nearly life-size painting is now in the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. The museum influences his art greatly and shows him as an artist and a museum educator. And he's got bones here. There's a mammoth. There's the archaeological tools right here. And there's painting a palette right here. And I can't really tell what this is. Someone said it was a turkey, maybe a stuffed turkey, but there is just to sort of show symbolically what his interests are. Peale's life is an example of the complexity of race relations during the late 1700s and early 1800s. He was a slave owner. Although he had enslaved a number of people, his peers considered him an abolitionist, especially after he votes in favor of Pennsylvania's Act for the Gradual Abolition of Slavery while serving in the state assembly. So this is not a painting by Peale, but it just shows the two different races here back at a time when there still were slaves. Peale purchased slaves or accepts them as payment for his paintings sometimes. What he did eventually was to free his slaves. His writings suggest that he was not concerned about the harm that slavery did to the enslaved. Instead, he was concerned about what slavery would do to slave owners, which is an interesting take on this. And here's another, what you've already seen. This is his last slave, Moses Williams, born in 1777, born to Scarborough and Lucy Peale, who were his slaves. He frees the parents, although the law, this is incredible at the time, the law mandates that the 9-year-old Moses remain in Peale's service until his 28th birthday. That was at least that was the law in those days, late 18th century. Moses would become the nation's first Black museum professional and a master silhouette artist at Peale's museum. And there's a silhouette of him right here. So Moses was instructed in the skills that would help him work in the museum, including taxidermy and silhouette making. Enslaved, he was not taught the higher arts of painting, but after showing his skill at silhouette making, Williams was given a physiotrace machine to make silhouettes and continue to work at Peale's museum. So he has a career doing this, and that's one of the early ones. Here's another one, portrait of, you may have seen this one, Yarrow Mahmoud Yartil, by Peale in 1819. He's formerly an enslaved Muslim, was reputedly 140 years old, which is obviously ridiculous, in 1819, when Peale paints his portrait, and he's actually 77. But the legend was that this man was very ancient. As Peale notes, Yarrow was comfortable in his situation, having stocks, and he lived in his own house. He was very comfortable in his position as being an elderly Black man at that point. Is a rare representation of ethnic and religious diversity in the United States. It's an outstanding example of Peale's late naturalistic style. The picture is distinguished by the direct and sympathetic encounter between the artist and his subject, and a skilled rendering of details. Yarrow's knit cap suggests a kufi, a hat traditionally worn by African men, Muslim men, to assert their, I missed that last part. Okay, let's get on to some other portraits and some other things that he does. This is a portrait of John Beale Bordley, who was a very important figure in his life as a financial supporter. In the years before the American Revolution, Bordley was an American planter, judge, and member of the Governor's Council. He's a fervent Republican. He gave Peale his first major commission. Bordley was a great admirer and close friend of Peale's, and in 1766, he raises funds to send him to London, where he studies under Benjamin West. Now, this is a propaganda painting that Peale does. It's hard to tell this, and because I read about this. There is a poisonous plant at the statue's base, right in, let's see, you see down at the bottom? Right on the, right down in, I can get my thing here. Come on. Yeah, it's over on the right-hand side, the bottom of the statue. Native American Jimson poison weed, which warns of the deadly consequences of an attack on American civil liberties. He wanted that included in this painting, down in here, right? Yeah.
Over to the right a little bit.
Or there,
To the right.
over there. Okay, good. Boardley owns a large plantation on Maryland's eastern shore and became increasingly engrossed in agricultural pursuits in the 1770s. He's a typical large plantation owner. He's also a slave owner, and historians have praised him as a slave owner who hated slavery, for speaking out against slavery, and for freeing his own slaves while completely ignoring the outrageously racist and profoundly offensive statements he wrote about slaves. So there's a lot of conflict there. I think he's not aware of what he was saying, but he finances Peale's trip to England. He buys his first major portrait right here, paints it, and he was a significant revolutionary when the revolution breaks out. Here's his brother, his younger brother James, painting in miniature right here. James was the younger brother of Charles. The next one is known for his miniatures and still life paintings. Here's James's nephew, Rembrandt Peale. James Peale worked in his brother's studio until January 1776, when he accepts a commission in the Continental Army as an ensign on a local regiment. Within 3 months, he is promoted to captain, and during the next 3 years, he fights in the battles on Long Island, White Plains, Trenton, Princeton, Brandywine, Germantown, Monmouth. I mean, he's a very active officer in the Revolution right here, and a loyal follower of his brothers. Peale's second son, Rembrandt Peale, this is a self-portrait done in 1828, who builds on his father's artistic reputation with two of his children, Michael Angelo and Emma Claire, also named obviously after other artists. He goes to France during the Napoleonic period, and he studies the paintings of Rubens, Van Dyck, others of that particular time. He really tries to educate himself beyond the levels of American painting, and studies with David. He studies French neoclassicism during a period in Paris when he's there for a couple of years, and it helps him break free from the British and American 18th century conventions that he had learned from his portraitist father. So it's a different style, and I'm going to show you a number of paintings by him. Rembrandt is considered Charles Willson Peale's most successful son. He takes, as I said, Raphael Peale, the oldest son, has his problems. I'll get into a little more detail on them in a minute. He takes up the mantle of his father as one of the most distinguished portrait painters of the time. Here are his paintings of Thomas Jefferson. On the left, he does in 1800, and New York Governor DeWitt Clinton. So he continues the whole portrait tradition. That's what he is really known for in the next generation after his father pretty much retires and eventually dies. Clinton is a former mayor of New York City and governor of New York, and against this background, he uses a soft background again to sort of make him stand out much more than he does of this portrait of Jefferson, which is when he's younger, when he paints this. Rembrandt Peale's portrait of Napoleon he does between 1808 and 1810 when he lived in Paris. His work was admired by Jacques-Louis, the leading neoclassicist artist of the day, and he was briefly a court painter for Napoleon. Rembrandt Peale's portrait on the left, David's is on the right. David does the portrait of Napoleon right here. Piled on the desk of Napoleon, we see a pen, we see several books, dossiers, rolled papers, a map on the green carpet of the floor. Napoleon wants to have himself styled as somebody who's really busy all the time. He's sort of not just out, beating up on Russia or Austria or somebody. These paintings are here. Napoleon's unbuttoned cuffs, wrinkled stockings, disheveled hair, the flickering candles, and the time on the clock, which I cannot see, indicates somewhere around 4 a.m. apparently, are all meant to imply that he's been up all night writing various laws. And early in his career, Napoleon is the Code Napoleon, and he is a great lawgiver before he gets going on his empire building. And Rembrandt Peale's painting is over here on the left of Napoleon. Different, quite different from Davies, actually. Okay, an early Rembrandt from 1811, The Roman Daughter, which presents a tale from antiquity about a woman who breastfeeds her father when she visits him, and I'd never seen this painting before, when she visits him to save his life. He's been sentenced to death by starvation. He's chained, and she carries out her moral duty to aid a parent, even if it violates propriety. Peale, for his part, was influenced in showing off his ability to provide a dual portrait, one figure standing and one seated, though critics do not know why Peale chose this particular subject, other than that he was going through the classic Roman stories and came across this one. Okay, so anyway, that's now this next one. Peter, this is yours, if you can read. Can you read this? You want me to turn the lights on? Let me turn the lights on. This is a, how's that? Can you read it? Yeah.
Rembrandt Peale chose to paint a subject intended to be a moral statement for contemporary times. To the far left of the central figure of death are war and his agents who trample over the bodies of his victims,
Right there.
widow and orphan. To death's right is a mass of humanity representing sins from intemperance to suicide, all of which are associated with those who have died leading decadent lives. Below the feet of death is the body of a man cut down in the plan of life,
Right here.
which demonstrates the power death holds over everyone. Approaching the central figure is old age, who is supported by faith, and after leading a long, productive, and pious life, welcomes death with outstretched arms.
Okay, thank you. I'll get the light. Here. Okay, so he loves these allegorical pictures as well as painting, and he's very much influenced by French classical painting, and this sort of shows it gets a little bit of everything into this painting right here, as Peter read to you. Now to go back again, these are the money makers. William Henry Harrison. He's a hero at the Battle of Tippecanoe in the War of 1812. Anybody notice what else he's known for? What else is he known for?
He died after a month in office.
Yeah, he dies after a month in August. He's president of the United States at the age of 67. And let me go on, come on, here. Sorry. And there's a picture of him, a photograph of him, actually, an early photo of him as an older man when he dies. But he's the young, handsome, romantic hero in this picture. Harrison had many friends in Eastern aristocracy and quickly gained a reputation among them as a frontier leader. Runs a successful horse breeding enterprise and won acclaim throughout the Northwest. On April 4th, 1841, he dies, the first president to die in office. And with him dies the Whig program, actually. One of these, so he dies at the age of 68, the first to die in office, the only one, and I think the shortest by far of presidential careers. Okay, this is also by Rembrandt, 1823, Washington before Yorktown. painting this, Washington, of course, has long since died. One of the few size portraits of Washington on horseback, astride his restless white horse, the heroic Washington turns toward Lafayette and other mounted officers right here. He's celebrating his victory. His mature facial features showed not at the age of 49 as he would have been at Yorktown, but as he appeared later at the end of his life, which is what Peale has to use it from, as portrayed as the father of the United States. The 3-week, as you heard yesterday, someone from Libby, the 3-week siege of Yorktown occurs in 1781, near the end of the Revolution. It doesn't end for another couple of years. At that point, Washington controls 14,000 troops from the combined American and French expeditionary forces. And there's more detail about the Battle of Yorktown, which we don't need to go into, but that's this heroic painting of Washington at the battle. This is something else, something different from Rembrandt Peale. This is not his father. 1816, it's a Maryland Center for History and Culture, depicts Rembrandt Peale in 1816 demonstrating a gas ring right here, gas ring to a group of 7 people as seen in the panel in the center, right here. In the left panel, a man is seen seated and conducting an experiment with light over here. While in the right panel, a man experiments with gas instruments. This dazzling display attracts potential investors and led to the formation of the Gas Light Company of Baltimore, which becomes the nation's first gas company, which was a precursor of the Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. The demonstration was aimed to gain support for illuminating the city with gas. So Rembrandt Peale is also an entrepreneur, like his father was. His interests are more technical and, of course, keeping up with the changing times. So this leads to the gas lighting of major cities during the next 10 to 15 years, the East Coast cities at least, these experiments. Here's a couple of landscapes of Niagara Falls. The depiction is a testament to the realistic movement's dedication to accuracy and to look at detail by Rembrandt Peale. The painting showcases the raw power and natural beauty of the falls with meticulous attention to the surrounding landscape. And you study that, it's remarkable. The use of light and shadow enhances the realism of this, making the viewer feel as though he or she is standing right on the edge of the falls. And I don't know whether this was painted there or not. I don't know anybody. I'm sure he was there, whether he did sketches of this and then took it back to his studio, but he obviously does a wonderful representation of it. Rosabella Peale at 20. Rembrandt Peale tutored his daughter in art and raised her as an independent and strong-minded young woman. Rosabella's pensive expression conveys the alert mind that won the admiration of so many. Following in her father's and grandfather's footsteps, she becomes an artist in her own right. She was known as an accomplished portraitist, landscape painter, and lithographer. Not surprisingly, she has many suitors. She refused to wed the, quote, everyday man, and does not marry until she is 62 years old. So she has quite a career. Author and critic John Neal wrote that her mind is excellent. Her father always taught her to think for herself, to reason, and to be firm without wrangling or argument. Unfortunately, and I don't know anything more about this, all the works associated with her name are credited to her father's portraits. So she didn't get, I've looked to see for portraits of her. Maybe you found some, Terrell, I don't know, but she is not, nothing that I could find was credited to her. They're all credited to her father, and maybe that's an indication of the art world is not ready for, as ready in this country for female artists. They certainly were in Europe, but she's his very powerful daughter. All right, Sarah Miriam Peale. She's the daughter of she, by contrast, paints more traditional portraits on canvas and still lives. Her father is James Peale, brother of Charles Willson. Her family called her Sally. She took up art training from her uncle, Charles Willson Peale, in his studio, and unlike her father, was a believer in the equality of women and encouraged her to, like her father, she was a believer in the equality of women and who encouraged her to pursue her career. She found great success as a portrait painter. Again, I haven't been able to find anything by her, but she's another very dynamic female in the Peale family. Now, this is the man I feel sorry for. This is the oldest son. This was painted in 1827 by his father. He followed his father into an art career. His brother Rembrandt concentrated on portraiture. Raphael became one of the first Americans to specialize in still lives. As the oldest child, the oldest son especially, has a difficult time sort of leading the way. But then the elder Peale retired from portrait painting. He urged his son to step in and take over and be the portrait, paint portraits. There's a career in this. Unlike Rembrandt Peale, his younger brother, Raphael found it difficult to flatter sitters, and after 1810 began to focus more on still lives. These fish right here, painted in 1817, a beautiful job here of that. Now I could show you many more. Here he is in the staircase picture that you saw a few minutes ago with his younger brother up here, Titian. His precarious health reinforces his preference for inanimate objects over living and breathing and possibly hard to satisfy clients. He experiences sporadic and severe attacks affecting his hands and stomach to the point where he is unable to paint at all. And he has, as I said, this ongoing conflict with his father, never really resolved, which is very sad. He dies before his father at the age of 51. And his father dies, as we said, at much older, 85 years old. Here's some Raphael Peale's still life paintings, often consisted of simple arrangements with a few modest components. As you see in the fruit piece over here, beautifully done. But he prefers this inanimate objects. He doesn't want to deal with the people that you would have to deal with in the painting of portraits. Here the composition is animated by light passing over the soft, ripe peaches, covered with a fine, nearly transparent handkerchief. The fabric's silky, ribbon-like edge directs the viewer's attention through the composition. A large wasp near the center echoes similar inclusions in this picture. So you see the wasp right here. There's a wasp for some reason sitting up there. Asserts his personal whimsy and his well-known ability to create illusionistic pictures designated to fool the eye to a viewer who might want to brush the insect away. That's the first step of what I'll show you in the last picture in a minute. Here's Rubens Peale with a geranium, National Gallery in Washington, painted by Rembrandt. This shows Rubens Peale as a botanist, sharing the spotlight with a flowering geranium right here. Rumored to have been the first specimen of this plant ever to have been grown in the New World right here. Due to his weak eyesight, Rubens did not paint seriously until the last decade of his life, when he painted scenes like cock and quail down in here. You can see right here. And here's another picture of him over in here. He wore glasses, and obviously he just couldn't see well enough, and I think he finally decided to try to do some painting before he died. From 1810 to 1821, he served as a director of his father's museum in Philadelphia before moving to Baltimore to help his brother Rembrandt manage the museum there. So he does have a career, but not as well known as as certainly his older brother, or even James. We'll close with Raphael Peale having a little fun. This is the unfortunate son. Venus rising from the sea, a deception. This is trying to sort of be a little bit like his father, creating this illusion here. Deception. Peale paints this in 1822, shortly before he dies. Demonstrates the humor as well as a veiled eroticism, perhaps confronting his own difficult marriage, question mark. A piece of white linen pinned to a cloth tape has been realistically stretched across where a shower curtain might be. The viewer is tempted to peek beneath this to see exactly what is being obscured. Creates this illusion of a cloth hiding a bathing woman. Technical examination, however, has revealed that her body does not continue underneath the linen. I don't know how they figured that out, but that's it. What can be discerned from this? A foot beneath the bottom edge of the fabric and a woman's arm above pulling her hair upwards, and that's all you can see. That's supposed to be the fool the eye type painting. Okay, well, we'll go on next week with more. We could turn the lights on. We'll go on next week with a much more complicated relationship, even than this, between Renoir. I'll show you some pictures of Renoir, and then of his son, and I'll show you some clips from his son. But that's it. Okay.
Does anyone have questions?
Question, Barbara?
Wonderful, wonderful. I learned so much history that I didn't know about Peale. I knew a little more about his art. But I wanted to ask you, you talked about the Peale daughters. Did you mention Angelica Kaufman? You were probably looking for the name Peale. But did you mention Angelica Kaufman as a daughter?
Did I?
I thought you did.
I did, yeah.
Well, she was you were saying the other daughters were never very successful. She was quite a successful
But
artist,
I couldn't find any of her
really.
paintings.
Well, I was thinking maybe you were looking for
No,
the Peale name, which I understood.
Maybe, but I honestly, it was very frustrating.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And maybe I couldn't either, but the name sounded for me.
It maybe says something about the attitude of the art establishment at that time
Maybe.
towards women.
But the other thing I wanted to say was that I was so glad you showed a picture of Moses Williams, because I couldn't pull his name up, but when you were showing this, what ended up to be the silhouettes, there was an interesting story about his career. He had a very good, successful career doing silhouettes, but he was not allowed to do a painting, which was a very interesting thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Daryl,
Right.
Daryl, do you want to give it to Daryl?
I'm sorry, we have somebody over here, Peggy.
Okay, yeah. Hang on. Go ahead.
Hi, many years ago, I took a painting class at Pennsylvania Academy where you copy one of the paintings they have. And I picked a couple of fruit pictures by Raphael Peale,
Yeah.
who was kind of apparently the black sheep of the
Yeah,
family.
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
But I looked up a lot of his history, and there was some thought that because he was the one who helped his father with taxidermy, that the toxic chemicals that he was using really affected.
Anyway, he and his father, I'm surprised they didn't get along, at least as far from what I know. But certainly it's plausible. Yeah.
Harry.
Daryl, I'm sorry, Daryl.
With the growing interest in women artists generally, Peale's daughters really are being discovered again. Individual works by her that were originated by them, that were attributed to their fathers, are really now being identified as.
I wish I could have found some. I would have liked to have shown them.
Well, it's a recent
Yeah, fairly recently, okay.
And how about Angelica?
Angelica too,
Yeah.
yes.
And she was.
Give this to Jules. here.
In the philosophic,
Hang on.
in the Philosophic Society, there's a portrait of Washington. Did Peale do that one?
The philosophical, I don't know. I'm not sure. He could have, but yeah. Okay.
With a remarkable similarity in the style of his sons and so many others in his family. Did he give any formal instruction, or were they all just self-taught?
He did. He instructed his children, yes, and his grandchildren, his granddaughters. And he was definitely wanted them to continue the family tradition. Okay.
Could I throw in something about one of his daughters? Her name was Sophonisba Sophonisba Peale.
Yeah.
And she was named for Sophonisba Anguissola, who was a Renaissance era woman painter. And when I was doing my Peale lectures a few years ago, I had never heard of her. And it's more than that, it was 2017. I went to the Prado and walked into a room of pictures of the Habsburg, rulers, emperors, whatever. And just right here on my right, I looked at this painting, and it was by Sophonisba Anguissola. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
and never having heard of her until.
That's why he named, obviously, she was well known. I mean, I
Yeah.
think
Well, and Angelica Kaufman
Yeah.
too. I mean, she was a big deal in London when he was there. So
well, I'm glad to hear, as you said, that the women artists of that day, of the early 19th century, are getting more recognition than they certainly used to get. That's good. Okay, well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Harry.